right after the First World War, 1920, is when the State Board of Aeronautics established state laws, way ahead of the federal government. We didn't even know if the federal government was going to take over control of airplanes.
The Oregon Board of Aeronautics, which is one of the oldest boards in the country, they had a licensing provision which included an aluminum license plate. We had licenses. I even had an Oregon State student permit. And then later on I got an Oregon State private license.
In 1926, the Department of Commerce, Bureau of Air Commerce, came into being. There were complete standards for the certification of aircraft, pilot training, and set up for the various types of licenses, and then all the rules and regulations for the transport industry and instrument flight.
June of 1926 is when the government took over the regulations. And that was before the FAA and before the CAA. It come under the Department of Commerce Aeronautics branch. The state of Oregon was the outlaw state of the whole United States. Connecticut and Oregon were the two outlaw states that didn't care what the federal regulations said or what they wanted us to do. We kept on flying anyhow.
Around about 1938, why it changed from the Bureau of Air Commerce to the Civil Aeronautics Administration. More extensive documentation, more regulations, more inspection for repairs. They had a lot more people that came into being.
The boys at the airport, as you've heard, were not licensed by the federal. They were only licensed state. And this was quite a battle. Many letters, many hours of meeting with people trying to keep the state license. In fact, one time, Fred had a plane that was stolen. He went out to fly, and the plane wasn't there. Someone picked it up and took it back into the hills. And to get the state people to help you was fine, but the feds, because we were not federally licensed, didn't want any part of it. We did get the plane back. We found out where it went, and why the fellow took it, we never knew, just a lark.
They were more or less always harassing us and trying to cause us trouble, and they wanted to inspect the airplanes, and they wanted to do this and they wanted to do that. They knew we had the state's rights, but they didn't want to respect them, and so consequently they'd say, well, every time you take off it's going to be a fine, something, I don't know, $1,000 or something. They had a fantastic figure all drove up, and they said, you're going to, every time you'll land and every time you'll take off and us. And I told him, well, I said, you get your book because you're going to fill it up. We're going to just keep on flying. They were writing all our names down, and it was going to really put us in jail, I guess, or something. But it didn't pan out for them because the state was still backing us up. And any time that we seemed to want to go to an air meet, they seemed to always be poking around and wanting to cause trouble and harassment. And just like one of them came up to the hangar one day and he wanted to look at my airplane, and it would happen to be a little bit muddy out there by the hangar. He says, go get me a board and lay down so I won't have to walk in this mud. And I of course told him what I had in mind then too. I didn't call him a federal inspector either. But I wasn't about to lay my coat down like Sir Walter Riley for that guy.
Yeah, 39 and 40, and that's when Charlie Walker was really hassling people. Through any means that he could, why he attempted to stop that type of flying that was out there, but there wasn't really much that he could do legally.
On a couple of fly-ins down to Springfield, Oregon, Charlie Walker was down there and he said, if you guys fly up the airways, I'll cite you and fine you. Yeah, in fact, I think he got physically abused a couple of times too. I think there were some real good fist fights.
The guys would get a gang together and they'd go down to the beach for a weekend. I've washed a lot of sand out of some of those old biplanes. You know, they'd camp out on the beach for a weekend and really have a roaring party. Or if they wanted to liven things up, they'd go up the coast, up to Longview, and have a big blast there. Well, Longview is Washington, which put the feds on their backs. You know, the feds would start coming around, and they'd start looking, you know. And I remember well an incident involving a flight under a bridge up near Longview, and there was a loop involved. And the bridge keeper was madder than hell, but he couldn't identify the aircraft for sure. But anyway, the feds hunted Beaverton for a week trying to figure out which biplane it was. Mm-hmm. You doing any flying this week? Oh yeah, I fly every day. Why? And just nosed around. They finally gave up, you know.
The CAA started to foster a program of requiring federal licenses on airplanes, and this went against the grain of the guys who were at Beaverton, and in fact it kind of generated the atmosphere of an outlaw group because of it. This started probably 1939, 1940, and even in 41, and right up to the war. I was flying on the Sunday of Pearl Harbor, and I remember landing and coming in, and someone said that they had bombed Pearl Harbor. So, and I didn't fly anymore that day, and the reason I recall this is because the following week, all airplanes within 100 miles of the coast were grounded.
It was George that challenged the federal government to arrest him for flying an illegal and experimental aircraft. And he was the first man to bring about the new flying rules by the federal government that permitted us once again to design and build our own airplane. If it hadn't been for George Bogartis, the present home building movement would never have been at all possible. It was because of his foresight and because of his grit and his determination and his nerve that we do have the present laws that permit sport aviation.
He took off and he headed east, and he made a personal appearance in Congress, and he petitioned Congress to have the ban on home building removed. He presented his aircraft as proof that this was possible for a man of average means and average intelligence to put together a sound, safe aircraft that was capable of long-distance flight and a safe flight. He demonstrated the aircraft, he took Congress to see it, and he won the battle. After he got done with Congress, he continued east. He flew the GB around the Statue of Liberty and then turned her home.